Hi, my name is Felicity. Today in this video I'll be showing you how to create a bubble interface using data from your Airtable base, pulling it through the API. So many of you who are frequent users of Airtable will have come across the limitation of once you have a base that gets to a certain size and you want to give people access to certain information in that base, you basically have to make them a full Airtable user, which costs money and also is tricky in terms of setting up permissions. And so you will be thinking, probably many of you, about how can I use the API with Airtable to pull that data out and display it in a portal form so that people can access the data they need, but I don't have to expose the whole of my base to them. There are lots of different ways to do that and lots of different products that help you to do that, one of which is Bubble, and that is what I am going to be showing you today. Okay, so you have your boilerplate to start with. The first thing we want to do is to go to the plugins, and we want to install a plugin. So all plugins. Apologies, I missed that button up the right. Okay, so add a new plugin. Click on the add a new plugin. You search for plugin. And I have found this search box very laggy. So I'm going to proceed with caution. Aha, here we are. So this is the the plugin rather by Bubble. So it's reliable. It can be a little bit of a Wild West with plugins, so be wary of that. Much like if you're familiar with WordPress, the plugin directory can have some great things and it has some less great things in. If you have a paid Bubble account, you can save different points, which probably is advisable before you do something like add a plugin. Okay, right, here we are. We need to add an account. So we need to add our recipe planner account, and we paste the API key in. Okay, invalid. Back here. Yes, I understand that would be invalid. Okay, right. I'm just going to scroll that out of sight. Okay, so the base that we want to use is our Ultimate Meal Planner. The table we would like to use is our, start off with
Sorry, I don't understand.
The table we would like to use is to start off with our recipes. And we're going to initialize that. Now you need to select a whole lot of fields, but I'm not going to go through the process of selecting them at the moment. I'm just going to save that. The reason being, I'll show you in a second. So we've got our first table, but we have links between these tables. So we need to create more than one table. Again, Ultimate Meal Planner. So we did recipes. Now we're going to do recipe ingredients, which is the joiner table, and initialize that. Now that we have more than one table, we have the option here to link. So now we can, actually we're just going to ignore this because we haven't yet updated our ingredients field. So let's just ignore these. Now you may ask why I'm not selecting the right things and then coming back to it. Unfortunately, when you add these fields, and this is a shortcoming of the plugin, when you add the fields and you go in to change them, it doesn't save them. So I'm not wasting my time because I know I'm going to have to go back to each of those different ones and change them anyway. Okay, so category is text. Homemade recipes, let's ignore this. In pantry, yes, no. Ingredients, text. Name, text. On list, number, quantity, text. Recipe, ingredients, link to, link to recipe ingredients, unit, text. Used in recipes, text. Save. Now we go back here. And if I had bothered to go through, this, it wouldn't have saved what I'd chosen. Okay, so display name, text, identifier, text. Now, if you're not sure what these are, go back to your base and have a look. The identifier you might think is a number, but I recall that it is here. It's text. So that's helpful to go back if you're not sure. Ingredient, link to the ingredients table. Meal, week, text, qualified, text, quantity, number. I think link to recipe ID. Let's ignore that, we don't want that. Shopping list, text. Okay, so you can come back and change these if you need to. And finally, our behemoth, text, attachment, QuickTime number, include. I'm not sure what that is, so we'll ignore it. Ingredients, text, instructions, ignore that field. Meals, we're ignoring that because we're not going to do the meal planner part. Notes, text. So you'll see, I'll just bring up here, we don't actually have that many options here. So something like notes is probably rich text field within Airtable, but we don't have that option here. We just have text and number, basically. So we work with what we've got. Sub-ingredients, and ignore that field. Okay, tags, total time, that should do us. Okay, so the larger your Airtable base and the more linked tables, the more onerous this process is going to be, and it's possibly the worst part of the whole deal for me. Okay, so we've got that set up. The next thing to do is to create a page to show the data. So we're going to add a new page. We're going to call this recipe list. Create it. And we're going to insert a repeating group. If you are not familiar with Bubble, there are lots of really great tutorials when you get started that take you through a lot of these components on what they are and what they do, and I advise that you watch them. So I'm just going to make this 2. I always like to make my repeating groups fewer so that I can see what's going on. And I'm going to make it a full list. So the type of content here, it's recipes that we're showing. And can you see, because of the API, these content types have been added through because of the API, which is great. Data source. So we need get data from external API. The provider, why it's our Airtable recipes. We're going to leave that there. And the first thing we're going to do is give ourselves the title of the recipe to give us a list. So insert dynamic data, current sales recipe, name is all we need. So we click over here to the preview button. And we should, with a little bit of luck, get a list of recipes. Aha! Hey presto. So, this is a bit problematic. Eat out. I know why it's in the Airtable base. It's because if you're adding a meal plan and you want to say, I'm eating out that night, you don't want to insert any ingredients for that, but you want to acknowledge that that's what you're doing. So this is going to cause us some problems. So we need to add a constraint in Bubble. So we need to add the constraint at the level of our repeating group. You'll remember the little dialogue here, and we can add a new constraint. So we want to make sure the name is not equal to eat out. Now, okay, and we close that. Bubble automatically saves as you go along. Great, that's just what we wanted. We've got a list of recipes. Easy as pie, you might say. Chicken pie, perhaps. Okay, so I'm just going to reduce the height of this a little bit. And I am going to insert a link underneath to take us to a second page. So, this, I'll make it a button link. And we're going to do, oops, sorry. Let's undo that. I wanted to send the text vertically within it, but I will have to edit the style to do that. That's for another time. Let's just make our button a bit bigger and make our repeating group a bit bigger to accommodate it. Okay, so we just want to say view recipe. Yeah. Of course, you could create the recipe name to be a link, but you'd have to go back and create that as a link. So we've just got a button style link here. Now we don't have a recipe page yet, so we need to do that before we get any further. Add a new page. Recipe, create. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a group on the page just so that we know that we've got something working. And I'm going to put a title in here that just says recipe. Give it a title, and let's okay. Looks good to me. Back here. Oh, sorry. One other thing. Now that we've got the page, if we go back to our recipe list, we need to link it up. So we need to say, instead of index recipe, we want to send some data to the page. Current cells recipes name, and that, I believe, is all we need to do. So let's go back here again, refresh. And let's view that recipe. You can see it's passed through the name here in the parameter. But I don't like this. This is going to cause us some problems here. We're going to have to escape all those characters. So we are going to go back to our Airtable base, and we're going to add a new row. Back to recipes. Sorry, I said row, I meant a new column, a new field. and we're going to call this one slug. You'll see this often in Airtable bases for this very reason. Okay, and what we're going to do is we need to create a formula. Now this is used so often that you will find this everywhere on the Airtable forums. This is a really popular formula. Okay, so we need to turn the name, which we have over here, into something where the spaces are escaped, and instead we return hyphens. Let's create this field. Okay, can you see we've got some nice a little better ones. So now we'll go back to bubble, and instead of using the name, we're going to have to, we're going to have to do this again, mate. Okay, we're going to have to reinitialize. So we're going to have to experience this pain because we have to bring in the slug now, and we know it's text. So see how it didn't save my settings? Yeah, that will annoy you, I promise. Ingredients, instructions, ignore field, meals, ignore field, name, text, notes, text, prep time, prepare, recipe ID, recipe ingredients, link to recipe ingredients, slug, that's what we've added, source, text, sub-ingredients, ignore, time, tags, text, total time number, text editor, okay. Whew. Speed working, okay. Let's go back here. Current cells recipes, slug, right. Let's go back again. This is one of the reasons I really like passing things through the URL. You can use the browser back button. Ah, look at this. Beautiful, beautiful slug up there. Okay, part 1 is done. Now, we just need to display something when we get there. So back to the recipe page. And let's try, start off simple. We want our title. Actually, you know what? We want this to be our title. So we want before we get anywhere, this group has no information attached to it, so we need to do just that. We need to make this a recipe. So the data source is get data from external API, API provider, Airtable recipes, add a new constraint, slug, equals, get data from page URL, path, close. Okay. Now, the data you're displaying is a list of recipes while it should be a single recipe. Click to use the first item of this list. Now we know that this is unique, but Airtable doesn't. So let's, sorry, I keep saying Airtable, I mean bubble. Right, now, let's go back here, make this dynamic, parents groups recipes, name. Let's see if that will work for us. Now we know we already have, we don't have to go back to the page before because we've got the parameter passed in here. Ah, look at that. Oh, doesn't it give you warm fuzzies? Okay. And then we can just simply, now that we have the data going into the group, we can just add a few more different fields. Parents groups, recipes, ingredients. Some more text underneath here. Parents groups, recipes. Good time. Add something here. What else would we like to have? Parents groups, recipes. Let's try notes. And let's also move these down. Leave a little bit of room for an image, because who doesn't like an image? Let's see whether we can get something to display. Parents groups, recipes, attachment, I believe it was called. Okay, so crossing fingers. Ah, look at this. Okay, we have got some great things here. We've got image, title, and we've got these ingredients. Now this is done rather nicely by the creator of the Airtable table, because the ingredients list here is actually just text, so we can just display it like this rather than having to use a repeating group to loop through all of the ingredients. But let's just see if we can do that, because that is probably what you will encounter in your Airtable. What I mean to say is, in the recipe, this all the ingredients is what we're displaying. But this is a formula field, which actually is pulling all the recipe ingredients from the other fields here, like recipe ingredients. Okay? And it's likely that you would rather loop through actually the ingredients. If you're building this yourself, you may not have the foresight to create a formula field that does it for you, so you might have to do it inside of Bubble. So let's see if we can do that. Right, so I'm going to just list it down here. I'm going to just show us ingredients list, just so when we see it on the page, we know what it's doing. Okay, heading duck. Okay. This is more of a little helper for us. Okay, so in order to do that, you will need to insert a repeating group, and I'm going to make that 2. This is my preference. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have to make this have a type of content. So it's going to be recipe ingredients, and the source is going to be parents groups recipes recipe ingredients. Okay. And then inside each of these, we want to list the name of the ingredient. So we're going to say current sales recipe ingredients. Ingredient name. So let me briefly explain what's happened here. This repeater group is showing a type of content of recipe ingredients, and those recipe ingredients, it's looping through rather, come from the parents group recipe that we've got displayed ingredients. Okay, so it's the recipe ingredients belong to this recipe of this page, right? But there are multiple of those, so it's going to loop through. So it'll loop through, and then for each loop, what we want to do is we want to get the current sales recipe ingredients, right? Ingredient name. So recipe ingredients is a joining table. So that joining table links to the ingredients table. The recipe ingredients table links to the ingredients table, and the ingredients table has multiple things in it, one of which is a name. So the recipe ingredients has a very clever formula that takes the name and the quantity and the unit value, I believe, and lists them all out for you. So it takes multiple things from multiple tables and lists them out. What we're doing here is we are doing those links within Bubble. So what we should get, and we'll see if that's the case, we should just get a list of the names of the ingredients, not the quantities or anything like that, but the names of the ingredients that are for this recipe. So let's just take a look. So here we've got the amount, the quantity, the unit type, and the ingredient name. But we should, underneath our ingredients list, just get the ingredient name. Now, we've got extra virgin oil and yellow onion. I think possibly because this chicken noodle soup has sub-ingredients, or possibly because this actually has vertical scrolling on. I have to say, this is one of the quirks about Bubble I really dislike. I don't want a vertical scroll by default. I know it's because it's an app and not a website, blah blah blah, but really, way to make it confusing, guys. This is what we expected. Okay. So can you see the difference? This is just displaying, although it looks great, this is doing all of the work inside of Airtable, which may be your preference, and possibly in many circumstances, including this one, is your preference. But this here is doing all the work inside of Bubble. So it does mean that if you are in a situation where in Airtable you're producing just multiple of these formulas and lookups and stuff, you can actually do that work in Bubble. So if you're doing that just for the purposes of getting something out the other end, you might want to shift that work over to Bubble, or it may be preferable for you to keep it in Airtable. But there we have it. We have a little recipe index of sorts, where all of the data coming from Airtable. I'm just going to demonstrate that that's the case. You know it's the case, but you know. Let's just demonstrate it. See how quickly it happens. There we go. Isn't that great? And I'm sure you can think of multiple different scenarios that you could use this in. And I hope I've shown you in my very amateurish video how you can do this and that it's of use to you. If you like this video, please subscribe. I'm hoping to add more as I go through things, but if you show me some love, I'll know that you like it, that you want more, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you.